So we're on 13a, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, towards the bottom. And we're discussing Moshe Rabbeinu's retrieving the remains of Yosef from Egypt so they can traverse with them through the desert and bring Yosef to his final resting place in Israel. As the Gemara describes it, he wasn't aware of where Yosef was located. So he asks Serach, daughter of Asher, his elder woman, and remembers from back in the early day when Yosef was buried. And according to the version we described yesterday, she tells him that he has been set in the Nile to bless it. The Egyptians put him there, and Yosef goes and calls forth, invokes the vow that the Jews made to take him out, as well as God's vow, and says, now it's time to go. And Yosef then, his casket made of metal floats to the surface, and that's how Moshe retrieves it. That's yesterday. Today, we have a different version to this story. And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. The line begins with the word Rabbeinu, al achas kama v'kama, and then Rabbi Nosson. You have it?
I got it.
Okay. Rabbi Nosson Omer. Rabbi Nosson says a different version to this similar story. Now, this version of the story does not take us back to the point at which Moshe Rabbeinu asks Serach, daughter of Asher. So it's possible that Rabbi Nosson's version is Moshe Rabbeinu knew where Yosef was and just went straight there. Or it's possible that Rabbi Nosson is only relating the story from the point where he differs from the first version. That is to say, even according to Rabbi Nosson, Moshe Rabbeinu had to ask Serach bas Asher, but her response was different than the previous version. Right? So I'm not sure which way it is. There's a little Zion here, maybe that will enlighten us. Hold on a second.
A different version of her story.
Of where she was. Okay, so the difference is only a version of where he was, where Yosef was. No help there.
But in any event, she did reveal.
So that's what I'm saying. Okay, let me just read what Rabbi Nosson says and you'll see what I mean. Rabbi Nosson says, the Kabrinet Shel Malachim Haya. Yosef was buried in the crypt of kings. Haya cover that's where he was buried. Halach Moshe went, Amad al Kabrinet Shel Malachim, and stood at the crypt of the kings. And he says, Yosef, Higia Ace, has come the time, Shenishba Kadosh Baruch Hu, where God's vow is being fulfilled, where God said, Shani Goyel Eschem, I'm going to redeem you. Higia Shvua, she's based as Yisrael. And there is the vow that you made the Jewish people swear to take you out of Egypt. And therefore, if you present yourself, mutav good, and if not, we are free from the vow, we are out. But at that moment, Yosef's coffin started to shake, and the Avihu Etzloi, not the Moshe took it, the Avihu Etzloi brought it to him. And then the verse is going to go on to describe where the Gemara is going to go on to describe where Yosef was during their travel in the desert. I'm just pointing out that Rabbi Nosson begins the narrative with Yosef was in the crypt of kings. Without starting with, Moshe didn't know where Yosef was. He went to Serach bas Asher, and Serach bas Asher told him where he was. Rabbi Nosson's version doesn't start with that. So you could look at that in two ways. Either option one is they both agree, both versions of the story include the fact that Moshe didn't know, and Moshe had to go ask Serach bas Asher where he is. But the question is only what the response was. Yesterday's version was the response is he's in the Nile. Today's version is the response is he's in the crypt of kings. That's one way of understanding this. But I don't think that's the correct way of understanding it. I think the correct way of understanding this is, to begin with, Rabbi Nosson says he didn't have to ask where he was. Obviously, he was in the crypt of kings. And he went there. Just wasn't sure within the crypt which one is Yosef. And thus he had to make this announcement. But in Rabbi Nosson's version, there's no mention of him asking Serach bas Asher.
Crypt of Kings
is like the tombs that they had where they would put all the mummies, all the kings.
they were called kings though, weren't they called pharaohs?
Pharaohs is
Same
just
thing.
another way of saying king, like Tsar or Caesar.
No, I know, but
Yeah, so the Gemara's language is kings.
why
It
did
doesn't
you use the
necessarily
word
mean,
kings as
yeah,
opposed
I
to-
don't know. I don't know that it means, I mean, maybe it is significant, but I don't know. It means the crypt of the pharaohs.
They were
Right.
known to be buried underwater.
No, it's the point. It's a different story. It's a different version of the story. He was not underwater.
Oh, this version was
Different,
under-
that's
oh.
correct.
Ah,
Yesterday's
I
version.
kept imagining that this
No.
was underwater.
Again, so that's what I'm saying. It's a separate version of the story.
No, that I
Yesterday's
understood,
version.
but I didn't understand that part of the second part.
That's
that
the
was
main
underwater.
distinction, whether it was in the
Yeah,
Nile
for sure it is.
or not,
Yeah.
right? So,
Okay.
but now I hope you understand my two ways of reading this Gemara, right? Is Rabbi Nassan only commenting on the second half of where he was located, but not in the first half, in that Rabbi Nassan also agrees that Moshe had to ask Sarah Bas Asher.
But you
But I don't think that's
believe
correct, because the most obvious place to find Yosef is in the crypt of kings.
Right, so he wouldn't have to go.
He wouldn't have to ask anybody. Sarah, yeah, presumably. So that's why I'm suggesting that Rabbi Nassan is actually a whole different version. He didn't have to ask anybody. He didn't have to ask Sarah. He just went to the crypt of kings because that's where he is, because he's a king. So he went there and announced, Yosef, make yourself known. And his coffin started to shake, and that's when he took him out. So another small distinction is that when Yosef, in the version that we read yesterday, where Yosef is buried in the Nile, when Moshe calls out to him, Moshe says, Yosef, Yosef, calling his name twice. Whereas when he's in the crypt of kings, in this version, Rabbi Nassan just says, Omar, he said, Yosef. Just said his name once, not twice.
So it's kind of like, it's an allusion to, where are you?
Yeah, so is the first, so is the other one where he says, Yosef, show yourself, right? But I'm just pointing out, it's interesting to note. The second thing that's interesting to note is that in the first version, in yesterday's story, when Moshe Rabbeinu causes the coffin to float by calling it forth, the Gemara asks, and don't be surprised at the fact that a metal can float, because we have a story of Elisha, who also made metal float.
Or maybe it's just the bones floated to the top.
It says metal. He's in a metal coffin in yesterday's version, right?
Right, but if the door opens. And
No, that's not what it says. It says the metal, like the Gemara says, don't be surprised at the fact that metal floats, right? Why shouldn't you be surprised? Because Elisha was able to do it, so certainly Moshe can do it, right? So the Gemara here does not say, and don't be surprised at the fact that our bones can shake. Because in today's version, he calls out, Yosef, where are you? And his coffin starts, or his body he starts to shake. The Gemara doesn't say, don't be surprised at the fact that bodies can shake. We just assume it's a miracle, right? I'm just pointing out distinctions. I'm not giving any explanations. Just pointing out distinctions between today's version versus yesterday's version. Aside from the obvious, where he's located in Crypt of Kings or buried in the water, there's also these slight variations. And I would imagine that all these variations come down to one central distinction. I don't necessarily have it clear, but I'll tell you where my thoughts are at. What are you going to say?
No, I'm saying, I think that because these stories are so dissimilar, that they don't come from the same source, right? You're saying that they're not coming from Sarah. The first.
Sarah isn't speaking in the Gemara.
Well, no, that.
Someone's relating that Sarah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They're relating that she told Moshe where Yosef was buried.
Right.
But the second story is so dissimilar.
Seems like, yeah, so there's
different ways.
So let's go through all the distinctions.
Right.
First one, Sarah is speaking. Second one, Sarah is not. Well, let's back up even more. In the first one, Moshe Rabbeinu does not know where he is. Sarah has to tell him. Second version, not.
Underwater.
The second must do is underwater or in the crypt of kings. Distinction 3 is the Gemara Yosef versus just Yosef once.
Right.
And distinction 5 is yesterday the Gemara had to deal with a curiosity. Why is he floating? Don't worry, he can float because look, Elisha did the miracle, so can Moshe. Whereas the Gemara over here doesn't ask, well, how can bodies shake when they're dead? The Gemara doesn't ask that. And I think the distinction comes down to something we talked about yesterday and the day before. Yosef buried in the Nile is symbolic of holiness embedded and concealed within the depth of impurity, the Nile being their idol worship. Right, the Egyptians worship the idol, and then they put Yosef, holiness, buried deep down inside metal, right, buried deep down inside metal to bless it. This is This is klipa, idol worship, serving as a parasite, siphoning off holiness. This is what we described yesterday. Right? So it's buried very deep down. So because of that, because it's buried so deep down in idol worship, there's a curiosity as to how can you possibly redeem idol worship? How can you possibly dig deep, so deep down to find idol worship, to find holiness in idol worship, to find the Yosef in idol worship? It's so deep. It's so impossible. How do you find that?
Is it not a deep river?
It's not, I have no idea, but it's not the point. The point is,
No,
I don't mean deep in the literal sense of how many
No.
miles down in the water. I mean the sense that it's very deep down spiritually,
I understand.
right? Put inside metal so it doesn't rot, protected, right? And as I mentioned before, the Gemara does not mention this yesterday. The Gemara doesn't say that they drowned him in the river. It says they fixed him in the rivers and like they stuck him down there and hid him somewhere there. That's the language there. Kavua, they stuck him in there, not just he drowned in there. Not just they let him drown, which is what would have happened. Drop metal into the water, it'll fall. That's not the way the Gemara says it. The Gemara says it that they fixed him. So I think that because we're talking about holiness that is buried, metaphorically deep within idol worship, the Gemara has to contend with how could you possibly retrieve such holiness from the worst of places, from idol worship itself? How could you do that? And therefore the Gemara says, even Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't sure, how are we going to do this? How am I going to find Yosef? How am I going to find the holiness that's stuck in the most worst idol worship of the world? So he's got to go to the elders. He's got to go to Sarah, daughter of Usher. He's got to go to, he has to dig deep into his ancestry, so to speak. We have to go back to our pure history and harness deep powers represented by Sarah bas Usher, this old lady who's connected to the years of old. Right? Dig deep down in his history. He's got to call out Yosef twice. We got to have proof to show, you see, Elisha also pulled metal out of the water. As if to say, it's difficult, but we can do it. Moshe can do it. Elisha did it, so can Moshe do it.
Right,
Someone like Moshe with the power of Sarah bas Usher going back generations, he's the kind of guy who can extract the Yosef out of the Nile. He's the one that can extract holiness out of idol worship. This is not normal. This is not something that everybody can do, almost the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, in other words, you don't go engage with the Nile. Don't start engaging with idol worship thinking you're going to redeem it. This is something that takes huge amounts of power. Right. Moshe Rabbeinu, even he himself struggled with it. He had to get the power of Yosef, Sarah bas Usher, calling Yosef. The Gemara has to prove, you see, Elisha also did it. Because this is not the normal.
Calling all the big guns.
That's right, because ordinary people cannot go to idol worship and extract holiness. You just can't do that.
Because it's klipas tameis.
Exactly. It's gimel klipas tameis in the language. He's making reference to, Tanya refers to two levels of klipa. One level of klipa is the kind that's noiga, the one that's malleable, the surface one, which can be used either for holy or negative, potentiality either way. Whereas there's idol worship is the three levels of impurity that cannot be redeemed. It also has holiness buried in there.
Right.
And like I mentioned yesterday, it takes
a piece of non-kosher meat.
That's correct. And like I mentioned yesterday, that the only way to elevate is when Mashiach comes. Mashiach comes. God says, I will remove the spirit of impurity. It's the only time to be able to extract that. So Moshe, the Redeemer, the Mashiach, actually the Gemara said that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Medrash says, Moshe is Goyal Rishon, Moshe is the first Redeemer, took us out of Egypt. Who Goyal Acher? He's also the last Redeemer. He is the Mashiach. Obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu himself is not the Mashiach. He doesn't come from the Davidic line. He's a Levi, right? But his energy, if you will, is the same energy that's going to be the last Redeemer, right? So someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, harnessing the power of Sarah bas Usher, plus calling Yosef, plus the Gemara is proving that it's okay. You see, Elisha did it also because Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu and Elisha are all connected. Eliyahu also being the harbinger of Mashiach's coming. They're the kind of people who can extract metal from the water. They're the kind of people who can extract the Yosef, the holiness from the deep impurity. But it takes all that kind of strength. But in the next version of Benashan's version, we know exactly where the holiness is. Right? So he's in the crypt of kings. In the crypt of kings, it could be, it's a reference to the level of Malchus. The level of Malchus, the level of kingship in the 10 spheres is the lowest of the 10. And its function is to project life into reality. So you have the divine system, divine wisdom, divine intelligence, divine kindness, divine judgment. These are all different faculties. But then the last stage is to take all of those powers and project them into the world to create. Right? Like speech. Use the example of speech. Malchus is like speech. Kingship is like speech. In that the words themselves.
In the Tanya, right?
We learned this in Tanya,
They
absolutely.
called it Shekhinah.
That's correct. So Malchus is, that's right.
And then you said projection into the next world down below.
Malchus is Shekhinah. And that's why perhaps the Gemara says Yosef's in the crypt of kings. Perhaps this is a reference to the idea that all of energy that God projects into this world has the potentiality to be Pharaoh or Yosef. And that's more like Klipas Noiga. That's more like the type of potential we have in our world to either be holy or unholy, right? Because Malchus is the divine projection into our reality. It's not so corrupted yet. It's just potential. God gives life into our world. That's what Malchus represents. There's life in our world, and you could use it either as a Yosef or you can use it as a Pharaoh.
Sounds similar to what we were discussing this morning, with
Potential, the choices, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And both are innate. You have to, but as humans, we make the choice.
That's right, because we have the innate Pharaoh in us, and we have the innate Yosef in us.
Right.
That's what God has projected into our reality. It's not like it's in the Nile, which is total idol worship, or like you have to have this great, crazy power to go extract it. It's not like that. This is in the crypt of kings. This is all in the state of potentiality where we have the Pharaoh in us and we have the Yosef in us. And that's the challenge. So Yosef, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and says, Yosef, you got to shake up. You got to shake that. You got to shake the Yosef in you. And once it's stirred, then it comes with you, right? Because there's the beautiful thing. We all have these experiences, especially if you connect to a Moshe Rabbeinu. If you go visit the Rebbe, you visit the oil, and you have your Galdi soul shakes. Gives a little shake. Sure, you feel a little something.
Yeah.
The Galdi soul's energy is, the Galdi soul's energy starts to pulsate.
Yeah.
The Yosef inside of us starts to shake in that crypt of kings. And then the Gemara says, Moshe takes him with him, and off they go. So in other words, once that Galdi soul starts to stir, you can harness all that potential and use it in a beautiful, good way to go on the journeys, the 42 journeys that actually follow. Yosef goes with them in those 42 journeys, right? Which we're describing this week's parsha in Maseh. Yes.
So these stories,
Yeah.
these two opposing stories, they could also coexist.
Exactly my point. So I was saying this yesterday, right? Every opinion in Torah is true. Right? So when it comes to difference of opinions in halacha, it's easier to understand how they're both true. Because so long as both opinions follow the rules of Torah, then their opinions are valid in Torah, right? And the question is, which one are we going to follow? Okay, so we have rules. You follow the majority. You follow Hillel rather than Shammai. But it doesn't mean Shammai is incorrect. As long as you're using the rules, the proper rules of interpretation of Torah, then all the opinions are correct. The question becomes, when we have a dispute in reality, like which story happened? Only one of these stories could have happened. So how do they both stay true? But when you give it a spiritual significance, because that's what they are, they are truly spiritual stories. They can both be true in a spiritual sense, even though in reality on the ground, only one of these stories could have happened. You can't have 5 different stories happening simultaneously in the physical world.
Right.
So only one of these stories happened. But even if one of these 2 stories happened, it doesn't mean the other one isn't true. The other one is true in their spiritual plane.
Right.
And in fact, I would argue that when Rabbi Nosson speaks about the story, he isn't speaking from the world of the physical. He's speaking to begin with from his spiritual vision. And he says, given my spiritual vision, this is what must have happened in the physical. So the spiritual vision he has is certainly true. Whether it happened in the physical world this way, maybe yes, maybe no. But his insight remains true on the spiritual sense, which is why I put all this effort into trying to find the spiritual significance behind these stories.
Negate one of 2
That's correct.
Stories.
That's correct. Ever. Even if only one of these versions happened in the literal sense,
Right.
you cannot negate any of the other versions because they all have spiritual significance. And that's the challenge that we try to rise up to when we learn these Gemaras, to try to find this spiritual significance.
Sometimes people like to just pick one side. Okay, that's it.
That's correct.
And that works for me. I understand it. Boom.
That's right.
You can't. You have to look.
That's right.
Always keep in your head.
Yep. Yes, indeed. Okay, we're going to stop over here because it's running late. So right now the ark is, Yosef's remains have been extracted either from the crypt of kings or from the Nile. And tomorrow, God willing, we're going to get to where Yosef's remains were positioned as they traveled in the desert and what the significance of that is. It's going to be quite remarkable and quite powerful.
You mean on the chariots?
Where physically it's located, where they carry it. They just drag it along. Like where they position it. There's a casket with Yosef's bones. He's going with them for 40 years in the desert, right? So where was it? In the middle of the camp, in Moshe's backyard, in his wagon. So let's find out tomorrow. God willing, we're going to get exactly the details of where it was, and the message therein is going to be very, very powerful, especially based on what we just finished saying in the two spiritual versions of the story. So God willing, coming tomorrow. Little cliffhanger. Okay, have a wonderful day.